Dr. Karen Weaver, live on Let's Talk About It. You are live on the air. Good morning.
Can't.
Hello and good morning, Dr. Weaver. You are live on the air.
All right, and good morning, and thank you all for tuning in to this is Pastor Threlkeld's show. Let's talk about it. And today, Pastor Threlkeld is someplace enjoying himself, but I want to say thank you to him for trusting me to have his show today. And I want to get started with a verse, because one thing we know is Pastor Threlkeld likes to start off with scripture. Now, I'm going to tell you, I was a little torn about where I was starting, but one of his favorite, and I thought that would be good, is Chronicles, 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and heal their land. Now we know Pastor Threlkeld likes that, and you know what? But another one that he likes, and with the times that we're in, you know, I had to talk about Ephesians 6 and 11, where you talk about where it says, "Put on the whole armor of God," because we're in some trying times. But before we get into our conversation, I have a couple of guests with me, and I want to say thank you to Royce Stevens, who is here with the Democratic Black Caucus, Genesee Democratic Black Caucus. Yes. Okay, help me get it right, yes. Royce, help me get it right. But he is the president of the Black Caucus here in Genesee County, and we thought it would be a good time to have a conversation about what is going on now that the dust has settled from this election. And I believe I have Jasmine Stanley McKenney on the line. Is that right, Jasmine? Are you with us?
I am with you.
Okay, well,
good morning.
Good morning, good morning. And thank you all for joining, because it's been a little bit over a week.
Yes.
It's been a little bit over a week. And one of the things we've been talking about is what now? What next? And where do we go from here? And you know what? And I'm going to say, well, Royce, Jasmine, you all feel free to jump in, because I'm not going to have this conversation by myself, because this is not a solo conversation. This is something that we need to be talking about as a community. It's something we need to be talking about as Black people. We need to be talking about it as the Democratic Party. So, Royce, you want to get started? And then Jasmine, you jump right on in.
I guess we need to look at some, to start out, we need to look at the facts of what happened, the why. I have a background in manufacturing, and one of the things we look at in Six Sigma is root cause. And what is the root cause? And, we know Kamala lost, but we looked at the numbers, and, the numbers say Trump didn't get extra voters.
Exactly.
It was the fact that a lot of people chose not to participate.
That's true. You know what? And I was listening, Jasmine, yesterday. Royce sent me something from MSNBC, and it was Simone, and she had, a panel, and they were talking about Trump did not get extra numbers, but 10 million of us, yes. And I don't mean Black, 10 million Democrats,
yes,
did not show up to vote, and they talked about why that is. So, what are your thoughts, Jasmine?
Well, I think that the messaging was off. Some people vote just because it's something that is ingrained in us and it's just what we do, and others need motivation. And I think people feel at every level of government that their voices aren't being heard. So I think that the Democratic Party has some work to do, and we all have some work to do to make sure that in 2 years, that we can do some things during the midterms to stop the Trump administration from what we know will be a catastrophic time for Black people. And so I think that messaging was a big deal. that the message didn't hit home for most Americans, that they voted their pocketbooks and they believe that Donald Trump, for some reason, is the one that had the best messaging on that.
Well, you know what? I think something that I just thought about this when we were talking about voting and people not being engaged and feeling like they're part of the process and not feeling like their voices are being heard. So I heard people saying, well, I finally took my signs down. But I have this, and it's on my coat, Royce. I have a vote pin and I'm still wearing it. And people said, you still have your vote pin on? And I said, yes, because I think it's something we need to talk about all of the time, not just prior to elections or election. This shouldn't be a seasonal kind of conversation that we're having. This needs to be something that we talk about all the time. So when people say that to me, it gives me an opportunity to have that kind of conversation with them. And I think we haven't done a good job of keeping people engaged, and we want to come and talk at election time, but we're not having the conversations. And if we're talking about it now, when they saw my vote sign, I can say, so are the people that we elected being accountable? Are they doing what they're saying they were going to do? If they're not, are they telling us why? And so I just thought it was important to continue with wearing that button to kind of engage people in this discussion.
That's like what I was thinking about this morning. It's like you right there with me where I was at, is the part about like keeping people engaged. When you talk about what's next, like now is the time to start. We got midterm elections coming up in what, 2 years?
Yes.
So, you know, we can't, are we going to do the same thing? Are we going to wait till the year of and then start really trying to reach out to people, get people engaged? Or are we going to start things we look at in Six Sigma is have these conversations now, the same, have these conversations with people and ask them, you know, what are they looking for? What do they need? What are the basic needs in our community? What do we need to elevate our community? And then start talking about those policies. And then, as you talked about, also holding people accountable is like really looking at our legislative leaders, our elected officials, and seeing what policies do they advocate for? What policies have they introduced? What policies have they supported? How do those policies affect our community? And kind of like, I guess that goes in what Jasmine was saying, this messaging is being able to translate that message. This is the policy. This is how it affects our community. Because, you know, people, you talk a lot of people are talking about feelings and how they feel and, you know, not being able to afford things. So yeah, I think that's what we need to really be looking at now, is what the community says they need.
Well, that was one of the things that, as I listened to what you sent yesterday, that they talked about was they were not listening to the people on the ground. They weren't listening to the people at the local level. Jasmine, I know we were doing some things, Royce, we were trying to do some things, and we did do some things to engage the community and kind of mobilize and focused on getting the vote out. What were you hearing, Jasmine, what were you hearing on the ground?
You know, I think that was the hardest part about the election results for me, is that I very rarely heard people that weren't going to support her. I heard people that weren't necessarily that excited. I heard more people that were excited, but it was just, so it was surprising. But I did hear a lot of excitement, but I also think that people after, as you said earlier, the dust settling, hearing people talk about feeling disconnected from her or from the party specifically. And so I think that the work that needs to be done has to start at a grassroots level, and then we need to dictate up to the party. And I think that was one of the things that even in the work that we were trying to do, Mayor Weaver, for this election, is that we were not always met with, and I don't want to bash the party, but we weren't always met with the resources that we needed to be able to deliver stronger votes here in Flint and Genesee County. And if you look at the election results, Flint is a little purple. And that's kind of interesting to me. So, we have work to do. To me, this is beyond party. I had friends that are Republicans, they're traditional Republicans, and they were voting for Kamala, and they did vote for Kamala, and they're just as concerned about democracy as we all are. So there are good people out there, but there are a lot of people where I'm looking at them with the side eye.
Okay, so but you brought up an interesting point when you were talking about getting resources to the people on the ground. Because while we were able to do some things, we were waiting for the resources, and we were told we were going to get the resources to have an office on the north side of Flint. We were not visible on the north side of Flint. That did not happen. And there was a whole lot of commotion and confusion. And I don't think that's bashing. We got to put the facts out there, because one of the things we also talked about is we're always trying to be politically correct and polite. And we're not, and sometimes people miss the message. We didn't get the resources we were told we were going to get. There was a lot of money that was spent. Or let me say this, there was a lot of money that came into the community, but a lot of us on the ground were wondering, where did it go, and why haven't we been able to access it in the way that we know would have been more meaningful and impactful right here in our community? And so that is a question. I think it's also interesting. You brought up a point about people not coming out, and I had this information because one of the things we said was we did see young people coming out. We saw them, engaged in this process, but did we do a good enough job here in the city of Flint? Now, here's the funny part. I don't know how old Royce is, but Jasmine, I know how old you are. And I think of you all. I mean, you're younger than me. So, but I remember when I turned 40, I told her I had lost my cushion, because everybody says you're grown enough to know better now. They don't say, oh, you're young, you still learning. Right. And so when I got this information, I was like, oh my goodness. But when I got this information, it was interesting to me, because when they talked about the young people, they had the ages broken down from 18 to 21, 22 to 30, and 31 to 40. I was like, I was right. It was 40. You are fully grown and you have no excuses. But when we look at the registered voters in Flint, so between the 18 and 21-year-olds, there are 3,782, and I'm talking about Flint only, Flint proper, and 1,433 voted, 1,433 voted. Between the ages of 22 and 30, there are 11,083 registered voters. 3,535 voted. Between the ages of 31 and 40, we have 15,327 registered voters, and 4,900 voted. So, I mean, while we were, we saw them coming out, and it was higher than it normally is, but we still missed a lot of voters in those age brackets. And what do we do? I mean, Jasmine, I know you have someone that just turned 18, and he was excited he talked about the privilege of voting. So what are we missing that we don't have others in that young group saying, I'm excited, and view it as a privilege and an obligation to vote?
I think we have to start the conversation earlier with young people. I think one of the biggest problems with American politics, and this is going to take a direct hit under the Trump administration, Trump 47 administration, is that our schools lack basic civics courses that hit home for people. So you have, and this is no disrespect to anybody, but you have an uneducated electorate. I remember when I was studying in college, we had a book, and it was called The 4-Year Election Cycle. And so it talked about how you can't, as you were talking about earlier, you and Royce, you can't start, in January of the year of the election. It has to be a continual process, that education, understanding how those policies connect home. We got unprecedented federal dollars into our community under the Biden-Harris administration, but for some reason that didn't resonate. It could not possibly have resonated because those dollars haven't hit home to every household. And so you feel disconnected. But, you know, the president and the vice president, they have a responsibility. The party has a responsibility to say, hey, we promised this and we delivered on this. And they just haven't done that. But yes, my son was excited, but that's something that he's grown up with. So his first political rally was 2008, going to see Obama at Kettering. There's a picture of him that the Flint Journal captured. He's on his dad's shoulder, excited at 2 years old, not fully understanding what he was doing. He wasn't even 2 at that time, actually. But so I think that we just have to start it younger, and we have to make sure that young people as well as older people are educated on how these policies that their lawmakers are making are contributing to their household.
Well, I saw when you were talking, Royce was nodding his head in agreement. And one of the things I've noticed that how old is your daughter, Royce?
13.
She's 13, and you had her right there,
yes,
engaged in the process. And you said you were surprised she seemed to really enjoy it. And I think when we expose our young people and bring them in with us, it becomes ingrained. But I wanted to add something. I know that was what I did with my kids. Anytime I went to vote, they were going. Anytime I was going to certain things that were political, I had them right there with me.
And I saw a similar experience. So with the Black Caucus, we worked with Secretary of State Benson, and she came in to do a mock election with students at New Standard Academy.
Okay.
And the students were engaged. They liked the process. And then just having like general conversation with them afterwards, they were ready to get more involved and learn more about politics and learn more about civics. And because that goes with what Jasmine says.
Well, and I want to go back to a point we talked about earlier, because some of the people that came out to vote, when we talk about, now we're talking about Democrats, we know they didn't vote for Kamala Harris. We know they voted for Trump because they voted at the Senate level. They voted at the congressional level. So what happened at the top? Do you think race or gender or messaging or all? I mean, what happened?
Again, I think it's about how people feel. And they don't feel like they have money, so it goes to economics. You hear a lot of people complain about, money going out the country to other causes, but not being spent here. So it makes you curious about the policies that Kamala was talking about, putting money into like Black small businesses. And I think you talked about the first-time home buyers,
right? And
seeing how those policies would affect our community. But we also talked about not letting that stuff die.
Yes.
Like, okay, it's been put on the table. It was
important.
Yes. So how do we keep those conversations going and have, things that's really going to uplift our community? Even education, like if we don't have civics classes, there's a reason why we don't have civics classes. Maybe because we need more funding in our schools. Those type of things. How do we keep those on the forefront of the conversation?
What do you think, Jeff?
I'm going to jump in.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm just going to put it out there. Malcolm X said that the most disrespected person in America
is the Black woman.
That the most unprotected person
and I'm a
in
testify
America.
to that one. As a Black woman that was an elected office, we get disrespected every single day, and we continue to go out there and fight. And this lady was so qualified. This lady was, when you look at her resume, Attorney General, Senator, Vice President, you can't tell me she was not qualified. But maybe we're not ready for a female here in these United States of America. And if we're not ready for a female, we're certainly not ready for a Black one. That's just, we didn't talk about that a lot, but we can't deny that race always plays a role. And yet a man that said, we as Black people eat dogs and cats was elected. And I think it goes to, let me go to my notes, Royce, because I was writing that down, because I always talk about the toxicity in the city and how difficult it is. And he said, let's not talk about what Kamala Harris did wrong. let's talk about where we are as a country.
Mhm.
I can't remember who it was that said it, that was on the show, but he said this is a toxic country combined with hatred, greed, and being concerned with myself instead of, it's about me and not we. And as blacks, we have all we used to be a collective, and now we have kind of assimilated into into society, and the things that got us where we are, the things that kept us going, the things that made us strong. We aren't centered in those kinds of things like we used to be. But that's why we're so resilient, because of what was instilled in us and how we grew, and I don't see that happening anymore. I see the toxicity. I see, it's about me and what I can get for me. And so we had somebody that said all kind of nasty things about, when they when they showed those pictures at the border, they didn't show anybody. All they showed were black people coming through, like only black people are the criminals. They're criminals coming through. And while yes, there are things that you put in place for borders, we're not going to say that you don't. But every time they showed that commercial, it was people that look like us trying to get through, portrayed as the criminals. Black people, brown people. Okay, I'm done.
No, the whole time I'm listening to you, the question is why? Why is that allowed now? Why are we gravitating back into that era?
Right. And it's scary. I know. Okay. Okay, Jasmine, go ahead. I know you have something to say. I know you do. But
well, I was just going to say, at the end of the day, I think that, we all had this sweetheart moment when Barack Obama was elected. And I think that it gave our country some pause that perhaps we were, what were they saying at that time? A post-racial society. And, and then you had a situation like George Floyd that happened during COVID, where it was brought to our faces like, no, we're not there. And then I think that, what happened in this election, while I do think there are many things that played a factor, I think the fact that she was a black woman, you talked about the fact that, hey, we elected a Democrat as a congressperson. We elected a Democrat and a woman as our senator, but we couldn't take it to the top of the ticket. There were so many votes that split when you look at Genesee County's election results. And to me, the only answer for that is the race piece, but I think it's the race coupled with her gender that really, we haven't had conversations about, and we've taken Black women for granted for so long. And how could you have someone, and it's the same thing with Hillary, really at the same time, but obviously Hillary won the popular vote. So there was something there that wasn't present for Kamala. And I believe that it is race. And to me, that's the conversation that we need to pivot to, and the conversation that we also need to have.
Wow, I agree with you on that. And something else that just happened, and I was when we talk about, I'm going back to the Democratic Party now. LaVora Barnes was chair, a Black female of the Michigan Democratic Party, and she resigned over the weekend, or maybe, I don't know if it was Wednesday or Thursday. She sent a letter out saying that she has resigned from that position. And I thought, that was interesting to me, because I remember when everything started, the excitement that we all had. And Jasmine, you remember we did that Win with Black Women call for Flint, Genesee County, and had almost 100 women on there. And LaVora Barnes was one of the women that came on there to talk with us. And we just felt such, excitement and positivity. And then who would know, a couple months later, she's stepping down. And I think that I don't know why. Maybe she was tired. It was a lot, and it was very emotional. It was very draining. So, it could be that, it could be better opportunities at something else. But you never know what happened. But I just thought that was interesting that she is now resigned from her position, and she was a black. She is a black female.
I don't know why she resigned, but I do think that we need, and I don't know if it's race related or not.
Okay.
But I do think that we need to, look further into race in the United States, because why a lot of people say, it's over. We don't have those issues anymore.
Oh, yes, we do.
They're still there. And there are people who wouldn't vote for Kamala just because, one, she was a woman, and then two, she was a black woman.
Right.
And that's something that we need to really address.
Yeah, we do. And that's a conversation like we were all saying, we need to continue with that conversation.
Yes.
And it can't be an isolated conversation. It's something that we need to have all the time.
Well, when you mentioned the George Floyd, the conversations were being had all the time, but we see how quick, people, you might throw a couple of dollars here and there, and say, and they were in support. But now we see how quickly those conversations have died. The funding is drying up. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is under attack now.
Yes.
So we really need to, really take a deep dive and step back and look at race in the United States. And how much worse is it going to get under this Trump administration? It's scary now.
Sure is. It's very scary right now. But that's why we have to be vigilant in what we're doing. That's why we can't stop. That's why we can't shy away. And when I say shy away, we have to have some real candid conversations about race, about the Democratic Party and where does it go? Because a lot of people said that they felt like the party has taken, they've taken us for granted. And people are tired of being taken for granted when things don't work out. As the black vote didn't come through, and some of that might be because I heard a lot of people say, I'm tired of being taken for granted and I don't get anything for my vote. And I'm not going to keep doing that. And that's a problem. I remember having a conversation with the reporter. This was during the primary for the presidential election in February when Biden was still running. And when you had that 100,000 plus uncommitted vote in Michigan. Well, some of those, I talked to some people, some of those were black people. It wasn't, and their issue wasn't around Gaza. Their issue was around, I'm tired of being taken for granted and you're not going to keep doing this to me. And I want to make a statement. So that's the other thing.
But we're gonna have to cite this in the MSNBC video we keep talking about.
I know it. We're gonna.
But
I'm gonna see if Landon can put that up for us too, so people can get that link.
But one of the things they said was we don't necessarily, while representation is good, we need policy.
Yeah.
And
we need some policy.
We need policy that's really going to affect our communities in a positive way. And I think that's what people are calling for right now.
And it has to be something they can feel that makes sense to them. Jasmine, I heard you were getting ready to say something. Go ahead and jump.
Well, I just think that they have othered us as well. So they've lumped us all in a category. And to the point that you were saying there, Weaver and Royce, about us having the conversation and not being afraid to have conversations about race with our white coworkers. I have them, with white coworkers that I feel safe with, about my feelings on race. So, the day after the election, I was talking to someone at work and I told them, I said, I am not BIPOC, I am Tupac. So, the whole Black Indigenous person of color, that's a way to lump us all together when we have some very individual needs. And our individual needs as Black people are not being met in this country, but they are being used, we are being used to help the other minorities with whatever it is that they need. And it was enough for them to not vote for Kamala. They didn't vote their best interest. On the whole, Black people did. but just maybe not enough of us. But at
Right.
the same time, we are only 12% of the population. I don't think Black people own the problem.
Right.
You
Exactly.
know what I'm saying?
Right.
The problem is what's going on with our Latino brothers and sisters that turned out to vote that was not in their best interest. What's wrong with our Arab American brothers and sisters? And even Kamala, as an Asian American, yes, I said it because, everybody's like, well, you can't be Asian and Black. Yes,
Yes,
you
you
can
can.
as biracial people.
Right.
Mhm.
So, she's an Asian American woman as well and lost the Asian American vote. Like, how is that even possible? Like, they didn't coalesce behind her like Black people did. Coalesce.
Mhm.
I mean, on the whole, Black people did
Right.
coalesce
Yes, we
in large
did.
numbers behind her. But, and to me, I think that we need to stand boldly as Black people and claim our Blackness and stop falling into I'm a minority. I'm BIPOC. I don't even understand.
I don't even,
what
I
that
know
is.
it. I
And
don't like that. And I get
ridiculous.
tired of, we're always, and now I'm going back to being politically correct as Black people. We're very accepting.
Yes.
And, we want to include everybody, but everybody doesn't include us. It'd be different if this was a two-way street. But I don't hear other communities saying, and my Black brothers and sisters. They talk about themselves, but they don't talk about us. And to your point, it was funny because one of the things Simone said was she was talking with white women and they're like, but we voted for her. She said, yeah, but 52% of you didn't. Over half of you didn't. You didn't coalesce around her, Jasmine, as a female.
So how that conversation is had with the Black community, we can't say that individually.
Right.
We supported or we didn't go against the grain, but other races can.
Yeah, that's right. Other races, well, they do.
Mm-hmm. So, the whole time it was about Black person was Black men or Black people wasn't going to support Kamala, but it's never addressed anybody else. But I think Jasmine says something about people look at us monolithic.
Right, they do.
And, we don't fit into one category.
Right. We sure don't.
Our needs are different.
They're very different, and we don't fit into one category, and we need to stop being looked at that way. And that's when we go and we talk about being taken for granted again. They assume we all have the same kinds of thought process. We all have the same needs, wants, and desires. And I think there's something that we all have as far as when you talk about wanting certain things, but there are things that may be important to me that may not be important to someone that's Black that lives in a different part of Michigan or a different part of the country, and we don't look at those kinds of things. We're just lumped into one big pot.
Well, let's address the fact that a lot of the, especially younger Black people that supported Trump, talked about. They said the terminology "money was in the streets," and only thing I can think about were the PPP loans or the stimulus checks that were going out. And again, so they're not looking at what was going on and the why. They just know at the time they had money.
And he signed a check.
He signed a check that he didn't want people to get. But then they're not looking at the bigger picture, like what type of check was signed for corporations. So
what we got was small.
Yes.
But what they got.
But they felt good. They
felt good at that time.
At that time.
Exactly.
And how can we help them sustain that? And those are the policies that we need, is one that make you feel good now, but then also policies that are sustainable that, people can feel good for the long haul.
So do either of you think that people feel good about the democratic process just in general and wanting to be engaged? Because I know one of the things they said was only 29% of the people in the country felt like the democratic process was even working. That's not very many people to feel that it's working, 29%. So that tells you there's a whole lot that felt like it's not working.
Well, and I just received a book in mail. I don't know how they found me, but it was about electoral college and why it's not relevant now. I'm curious about it. I don't take a strong, I get why it was in place. I get why people
when it was in place.
And I get why people are against it. I'm not I don't have a strong feeling on it yet, but I'm kind of curious and kind of want to look at this book a little bit and see from their point of view.
You have to come and talk about it too, and let us know.
Okay.
And let us know. I don't know. Have you heard those same kinds of things, or have you heard anything different, Jasmine, as far as how people feel about this process?
You know, it's interesting because I have a lot of conversations with my kids. And so Sasha, who is soon to be 17 next week, and will vote next year, whenever the next election
She'll
is.
vote in the midterms.
So, yeah. So she was telling me about some things that some of her friends were talking about. And there were some questions about, I'll call it the integrity of the election process. And, you know, them just also feeling that it should be also more accessible. I think that obviously when now we have early voting, which increases accessibility, but, you know, the young people are wanting to push it even a step further. Like, we have smartphones. Why can't we vote from our phone? And so I think, you know, and obviously then we have some real questions about the integrity of the process and making sure that the voter is validated as you do. But I think Washington State, I think they actually do electronic, some kind of electronic voting, or they were testing it at some point.
Right.
And so I think I just think that, you know, we do have to hold our local clerk's offices accountable, but not just during, you know, a presidential election, also during local elections. I think that, you know, that part of the job of the clerk is to educate. And if they're not educating, then they do become suspect. So there might not be anything that's happening there. But if you're not connected to community, then there is a question of what's happening. You know, it's like the Wizard of Oz. Somebody's behind that curtain, and they're making things happen. Or also, if you think about it, we have elections here in Flint where we have to take days and weeks to figure out who won,
which makes
on
no
a
sense,
local level,
in a city this small.
Which makes no sense. But you can call a whole presidential election, and we still don't know who won our city council. Like, how is that even possible?
That happened in my election as well. They had, you know, the governor was running, the attorney general, the secretary of state, and you couldn't figure out the mayor's race. But then when we went to canvassing meetings and you hear all of the flaws in our system, we as Democrats never want to challenge that. Well, that's a Republican issue. Is what we're told. So don't talk about it. But we should all want to be able to trust in the process. That shouldn't be a partisan issue. That should be nonpartisan, because we hear people all over say, you know, I don't trust the system. I'm going to go vote in person. I'm scared to put it in the mail. All of these things. And so a lot of us have concerns about the process. But as Democrats, we're told, don't talk about that. Really, that's a Republican issue, and that's not true. It should be an issue that we're all concerned about, and we should all want to believe in the process, that it's fair and equitable.
And again, so these are the times that we need to have those conversations. I know that's one of the things I want the caucus to be focused on, is having those type of conversations, the understanding, like, what do the people say they want? You know, and you know, so we have candidates coming around again the next election cycle. We can tell them, like, this is where our community feels it needs. And where do you stand on these type of policies? Are you in favor of them? Are you able to introduce them? Are you going to fight for us?
Right.
And that way we can have something to judge people on. And then when they get in office, you remember you said this? This is a policy you said you're going to fight for. So where is it?
Where is it? Right.
And that's where we need, when you talk about engagement, is keeping, you know, people engaged. Everybody doesn't have the schedule to go to every city council meeting, watch, you know, C-SPAN and see all the policies. So I think we need to make that information available to people. Again, Jasmine talked about communication earlier, messaging. in that way, so we can look at the messaging and show people, we can create the messaging around what our elected officials have done, good or bad.
So do either of you think people are burned out on election? They just don't want to hear it anymore. I'm tired of hearing about that. It hasn't made a difference. And I mean,
has your phone calmed down a little bit since the election?
Well, at first, right after the election, nobody wanted to talk.
Right.
At least in my circle, nobody
even
wanted to talk. We've just started talking. That's why I said, well, the dust is settled. Let's start having the conversation. But for that moment, we weren't doing anything. I know I wasn't.
But I mean,
and some people don't even want to turn. They're like, I'm not watching the news yet. I don't want to hear any of that stuff right now. Okay, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that, but your phone was going off. You got all these different people calling you or texting you all the time, emailing you all the time. So I think people are kind of burnt out, and we need to spread that out. We need to spread that out now. Like, let's educate the people. And let's engage them now. So when it comes that time again, we already have those relationships. They're already engaged. You don't have to overdo it.
It's like we don't keep the infrastructure in place. We start building it right before election, and then we let it go. And then we start over, and then we let it go. And so we've got to be better about our business as far as that kind of education and information goes.
And I feel like we listening to people who were more involved, like before I got involved, it sounds like, we had that history here in Flint where
we did. What happened?
Over time, it seems like it's dwindled, and you see, and I talked to a lot of people about the same thing. You see the same faces. Everywhere you go, you see the same faces.
Well, that was what I noticed. And I don't know how many of the rallies you went to, Royce or Jasmine, but that was one of the things people were saying is we had all of these rallies and people coming in, but you went and you saw the same people. It wasn't bringing in a lot of new people. And there's only so much the same people can do.
And that was a conversation I had, because one of the candidates wanted to have a town hall, like in the 11th hour, and it was like, okay, so you're gonna have this town hall, and who are you gonna have there?
Right.
Are you gonna have the same people that are already engaged, that know what the issues are and already ready to vote, or are you gonna attract new people?
Right.
And if that's your goal, how are you gonna
do it? And that's how I felt. Even though we started early vote 9 days ahead. But absentee ballot voting was going on. And I just felt like if we don't have any buses, vans, something taking people to these polls, I didn't see, rallies are fine early on, but we need to be getting people to the polls. And I know those were the things that we were focused on during this election.
Well, I think we have a good opportunity right now, because we get to look at our local elections right now. And, we're not going to be overwhelmed with the national election. Like, we can talk local politics and what affects us, right here in our city, what we can control right here in our city.
Yeah.
And grow, and grow from there.
Okay, Jasmine, what say you? Did I lose Jasmine?
I can hear you. I'm breaking up a little bit.
You are?
Right
okay,
now.
I'm sorry.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. No, I would just agree with what's being said. I think one of the difficult things is that obviously during a presidential election or even a gubernatorial election, you have more resources on the ground. Resources, I mean money, to be able to turn that vote out. But we need some of those resources in the downtime to be able to do that voter education piece. And there's not as much available for that. Because we do have to meet people where we are. Where, I have friends, I would say I could say honestly, probably 100% of my friends voted in the election. So who am I impacting? You know what I'm saying? So I have to get outside my own bubble. And how do I do that? We have to, really do some community organizing and do some grassroots things. I think that was also one of the things that President Obama during his '08 election, and then even again in 2012, that he was able to do was bring in new voters to the process. So if we're not bringing in those new voters, then we just are kind of at a stalemate. And I do really appreciate what you said earlier, Mayor Weaver, that, you know, the questions about elections and integrity to our election process, those aren't partisan topics. Those are topics that affect every American. And so those are things that transcend. And I think that right now, unfortunately, we're in a place where a lot of people can't transcend party. You know, Black people can, I think,
Yes.
but sometimes it's a little bit more difficult for our more privileged brothers and sisters to actually recognize that, oh, okay, you know, we need to question this process. We're not, you know, it's not a topic that's owned by the Republican Party because it can impact anyone.
Right. And it does. And it does.
Mhm.
And so those are the things that we really need to be, like you said, having those kinds of conversations. We've avoided difficult conversations. And I think it's been to our detriment that we have avoided these kinds of conversations because we see where we are now. And so many people have just said, forget it, it's not worth it, it doesn't matter. And that's something that we don't want to have happen because we do have some elections coming up. But here's something, I'm gonna switch gear a little
Mayor
bit.
Weaver?
Yes.
I think that you got a text message. I know I did as well. I don't know if this person wants me to say their name, but they want to know, where did all the money go in the GOTV urban communities, especially in Genesee County and the city of Flint? And I know that we talked about that a little bit.
That's a
but
good question.
We do need to question that,
Right.
and hold those individuals accountable. There's a
Right.
lot of people. I told people, you know, a few years ago, it's going to be a lot of money that comes in here for this presidential election.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that those resources get to the ground.
Right.
And I just don't feel like they did.
didn't.
I think that some of it did,
Some.
but not on the whole,
Because
you know,
we
and
had put
definitely
together
had
something. You know, we had put together a
Mhm.
package. You know, we were supposed to have an office. In fact, we were having it right there on North Saginaw, where that Citizens Bank was. People were ready. They were excited. They were ready to come in there and start working. I do think we would have gotten some people that we don't normally get because it would have been more visible. People, I got so many calls about where's the headquarters. People didn't know. And then we're like, when are we opening up one over here on the north side? I said, I don't know, because the money we were told we were going to get did not come through. And we were told to put something together. It did not happen. We put it together. So I don't know. And we had conversations with some different entities that did not come through for us at that level like they were supposed to. Sometimes I felt like people were working. I'm gonna just be honest. I felt like sometimes people were working to get our senator and congressional person in, but they weren't working that hard to get Kamala Harris in. And I remember saying to them, I said, you all are working really hard for these other seats. And I understand, because I mean, if we get our president, we know our president needs support. You don't want to go in and everybody's against you, but I want to see that same kind of time, effort, energy, sweat go into getting Kamala Harris elected. And you didn't see that. And now look where we are. You know, look what happened. They are there, but we are not. And I'm using they and we, well, you know, so anyway, let me just stop.
Well, I was just going to say, and normally it's the reverse, right? The top of the ticket is the one that we're resourcing. That's the one that we're pushing. And then they bring, you know, they're bringing the momentum to every other level of the ticket. And that was AC Dumas. He told me to say his name. So he is the one that is questioning. I think we all have to question that. And I think that we need to definitely challenge the party, you know, in terms of going forward, because 2 years, 4 years, those things will be here before we know it.
Right.
And so we have to start challenging them tomorrow, today, even.
Mm-hmm.
this is a conversation we have amongst the other, what is it, 7 other Black caucuses around the state, and we seem to have the same conversation every election cycle. Like, where's the money going?
Right.
Everybody in our community, we know money's coming in, but everybody in our community is expected to volunteer.
Right. There you go. We're expected to volunteer.
Yes.
Let's keep it real, because we know some people aren't volunteering,
and those are the people that you see, and they're aggressively encouraging you to volunteer.
Right. As they get paid. Putting money. Where's my pocket? I don't have a pocket.
And so, it's kind of disheartening, because we see it every election cycle, and especially when it's people that's not from our community,
right,
that are like brought in to lead in our community.
And you're like, who are you?
Like, yes.
Who are you?
And
why are we going there?
Yes.
How come we're not doing it over here?
Yes.
And they come in and think they know, and so it's how do you get that communication? So. Because a lot of us said they're not reaching who needs to be reached here. They're reaching the people that are going to vote anyway. And you know how they're going to vote, most of them. Some of them fooled us, but for the most part, it's the like Jasmine said, the people in my circle are going to vote, And so how do we get outside of that bubble where we're bringing in some new people? What do we do?
Well, again, it's those young people. We have to show those young people again and again. We got local elections, and showing them how these local elections and these policies affect you, and making it like you have to paint the picture.
Okay,
you can't, if everybody can't visualize what's happening, and sometimes so we have to take the time out, paint this picture, and show people like how everything affects your everyday life, how this policy affects the income in your pocket. Grocery prices, inflation, all that. Explain how that works. Like, I don't think people really understand that, and that goes back to what Jasmine was saying about civics class.
Right,
is people don't have a basic understanding of civics.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about
they don't understand how government works,
yes,
and the different roles.
They can't even sign their name.
Oh, Jasmine.
Yes. But like
that's true.
Right.
They can print it.
Right. But see, everybody
they can print it. I mean, I took my young voter to vote, and they said, we need your signature. And he had to think twice about what that was going to look like. So I'm just saying.
I think they started back teaching it.
They shouldn't have stopped, but okay, let's go back. You're right. I hope so. I hope so.
Back. But yeah, but we just need to educate them and make sure that they know, how this affects your life and that it's important. Because I grew up in a house with parents that watched news, read the newspaper.
We don't believe it. Look, well, when we talk about news, a lot of us, I'm one of them. I'll just go on and admit it. We don't trust the news. We don't, whether it's local or national. A lot of things don't get talked about in the news. Those things that we need to be educated and informed about, that are in our best interest, that are how we make decisions about ourselves, our family, our community, are not being shared. That's been one of the things I've talked about for a long time now. And when we talk about accountability, that's another area where we need to be holding them accountable, because they do whatever they want. They tell you whatever they want to tell you. They tell it to you late. They tell it to you wrong. And so, but to your point, we grew up watching it, and so it was just part of our being, is you were informed about certain things.
Right.
I know I'm dating myself, but one of the things we said is, if Walter Cronkite said it, you could believe it.
Right.
You could believe it. So, and we don't have that kind of news.
It's more sensational.
Exactly. That's what it is. It's sensational and not always accurate, factual, those kinds of things.
And you think a lot of times people are only reading headlines.
They do just read headlines, and then you get to the end of the article and it's like, oh, here it is. It's in the last couple of sentences. Well, you haven't gone that far. You look at the picture, you read the headline, and then you move on. And so it's, how do we get information to people again? I don't know. I know what I was going to say. And I know we're almost out of time, so I'm going to be quick. But one of the things they said we didn't do, and now I'm talking about we as Democrats didn't do that the Republican Party did, was, and Obama did this, so I don't know where it fell off, was engaging the digital space when we talk about young people and getting people engaged. And we did those traditional things, which we need to do because there are people that are still traditional, and that's how they get their information, and that's how we respond. But they talked about the use of podcast and those kinds of things, and that wasn't taken advantage of in our
Mm-hmm. And I heard that.
space.
I heard them when they said that, and I know I heard on a couple of different shows where they were saying, with Kamala, she wasn't in the media right away. I don't know if that's because she, it was happening so fast and she had to get herself,
right. It takes a minute to say, "Oh, I'm running for president."
Yes, okay. Yes. Especially when you didn't have that intention.
Exactly.
But even they were talking about even before that shift, where was the Democratic Party wasn't using that, and was that something because of Biden, or what's the why? Again, it's the why that we don't have the answers to.
Right. And you know what? We've got about 2 minutes left. So, Jasmine, anything before we close?
My closing comment is we've got work to do, and go vote.
And go vote. And we do have work
I
to do.
still have my vote pen too.
Okay. See, that's what we that's right. We got to do that. Royce, anything from yourself or the Black Caucus?
I just think right now is our time to, assert ourselves and be heard and be vocal, and not now, like you said, the dust has settled.
Right.
Let's go and work, like Jasmine
brush ourselves off and get right back in there, because we do have work to do, and we cannot get weary in well doing. And so we need to continue in this struggle and in this fight. It doesn't mean that we give up. We don't give up on this. And so that's important. And you know what? I had something. Let me see if I can find it that I wanted to read. And I don't know if I took that picture or not. Okay. And I saw this on social media, and I can't remember whose page it was on, but it was the Serenity Prayer for our times. I don't know if you all saw that. It said, "God, grant me the patience to work with the unjust systems that I cannot change today, the courage to strategically enact progress when I know I can, and the wisdom to know that despite structural oppression, I can still make a difference. Amen." We're going to thank you all for tuning in. Look, I got to say, Pastor Threlkeld, thank you for letting us have this opportunity. And you know what else I have to say? Pastor Threlkeld always talks about buy local, buy Black. There are so many Black businesses in the city of Flint that we need to be supporting. And it starts with us supporting our own. Let our dollars turn over in our own community. Thank you all for tuning into Let's Talk About It. And I'm Karen Weaver. I'm here with Royce Stevens and Jasmine Stanley McKenney. Thank you all, and have a great Saturday.
We thank you for tuning in to the Let's Talk About It.